Lillington Parish Church still has Saxon work of the 10th century, evident in the south wall of the chancel, and the doorway in the Lady Chapel, which there is good reason to believe may date from about 1020, and so is 1,000 years old this year. This presentation is a shortened version of a talk first given to Lillington Local History Society in January to mark this significant anniversary. Up to 1847, the doorway formed the north door of the nave. It was moved that year when the nave was rebuilt, and again in 1884 to its present position. So what is the evidence for our doorway's Saxon origins? First of all, the Saxon origins of Lillington. Lillington, like Leamington, was settled by Angles moving west from East Anglia or south from the Trent, probably in the last half of the 6th century, around the year 570. In fact, the northern half of modern Warwickshire was settled, like Mercia, by Angles from the east. Saxon architecture and Norman are often called Romanesque, since both use the round arch, but there are very distinct differences in style between them. This is a fine example of a Norman doorway at Bow Desert near Henley in Arden. It has 3 pairs of inset columns with ornamented capitals and a profusion of chevron moulding round the arch. This door at St Nicholas, Kenilworth, may have been salvaged from Kenilworth Priory. 2 pairs of inset columns here and ornamented with embattlings and beakheads. 2 plainer examples, St Swithin Martyr Worthy near Winchester, billets, chevrons and 1 pair of inset columns, and even the plainest still has its pair of inset columns, as at St Matthew Langford near Lechlade. Complete Saxon buildings are rare, but here is a very early one at Escombe by the River Wear north of Darlington. It stands in a circular churchyard, which suggests a pre-Christian burial ground, and has just a nave and chancel. Notice the 2 tiny round-headed windows in the nave. Surviving Saxon churches are typically tall for their width, but that may be a later Saxon characteristic. Early examples may have been lower, and the change of size of the top 7 or 8 stone courses suggests the roof height at Escombe has been raised. Lillington has never been a tall building, which may suggest an early date for it. This is a later and more sophisticated example at Bradford-upon-Avon, upstream from Bath. It belonged to the nuns of Shaftesbury Abbey and is connected with the cult of St Edward the Martyr, the elder brother of Ethelred the Unready. Notice at the right of the picture that it has no east window. No east window in a church strikes us now as a surprise, but it is quite common in pre-conquest churches. This drawing of Lillington Church by James Saunders about 1810 is in the Stratford Birthplace Archive. It shows a memorial tablet on the east wall and no east window. The north door at Bradford-upon-Avon is narrow and has a prominent moulding and oblong impost blocks where the arch meets the vertical. This is Odder's Chapel at Deerhurst near Tewkesbury, which is another example of a late Saxon survival. The north door of Odder's Chapel, and back once again to Lillington. There is perhaps some symbolic significance in the tall and narrow form of Saxon doors, recalling the verse from the Gospels, "Strait is the gate and narrow is the way which leads to life." There is evidence from the charters of Kenilworth Priory and from ownership disputes with the Bishop of Coventry and Lichfield to show that the foundation of Lillington Church is pre-conquest. The best evidence for the date of Lillington's doorway is its appearance, its narrow proportions with square impost blocks and plain moulded frame without inset columns. It looks Saxon, therefore it is Saxon. The Mercians were converted to Christianity traditionally by Saint Cedd and Saint Chad between 653 and 672. There is a royal estate at Stoneleigh and a minster church at Wootton, which we know as Leek Wootton, by about 700. And this royal minster church at Wootton has Leamington, Lillington, Cubbington, Milverton and Ashow under its care. There is good evidence for a preaching cross as the first Christian symbol in the pagan burial ground. Two parishioners in the 1540s in their wills asked to be buried near the churchyard cross. And as late as 1855, Nathaniel Hawthorne records seeing a stone platform much worn and grass-grown by the path to the church. This platform, perhaps the base of the cross, seems to be shown in a drawing made by the Reverend Thomas Ward in about 1830. At the edge of a prominent hill top, it seems certain that the burial ground of the first Anglo-Saxon settlement is coincident with the oldest part of the present churchyard. Notice that the church is not in the centre of the churchyard, being offset to the north to give way to the preaching cross. This map of 1886 also shows a bank in a field opposite, perhaps indicating that the burial ground was once larger. It isn't known when a church was first built at Lillington, but perhaps around 760 during the long reign of King Offa. If a church had not been built by the 780s, then the next 150 years are unlikely to have been a good time for church building. Viking raids began in the north from 787. Alfred the Great made peace in 886, dividing England at Watling Street, and raids from overseas stopped, but civil wars continue until 954. Under Alfred and his successors, the old scattered homesteads were abandoned. New nucleated settlements were formed, surrounded by the common open fields, and Lillington, with its two main streets and two cross streets, is one of these from around 900. And Warwickshire itself was formed about the same time, primarily to make tax collection easier. The reign of Edgar the Peaceable was a golden age, free of civil and foreign warfare. If Lillington did not already have a stone church, then a red sandstone church with nave and chancel is built at this time. The chancel south wall is a survivor of this church. In 1847, the Saxon nave was demolished, but a drawing of 1805 shows the contrast of colour between the red nave and the grey aisle. After the death of Edgar, a further period of Viking raids began, culminating in the arrival of Canute of Denmark in 1016. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle records what happened that year. This year came King Canute and Alderman Edric with him over the Thames into Mercia at Cricklade, whence they proceeded to Warwickshire during the middle of the winter, and plundered therein and burned and slew all they met. It's known that a nunnery at Warwick and another at Coventry were destroyed. Lillington is on one of the ancient routes from Warwick to Coventry, and if Canute passed this way, the little church on the hill is unlikely to have been spared. Canute defeated Edmund Ironside at Ashington. Edmund soon after died, and in December 1016 Canute was king of all England. As king, Canute tried to make amends for his former life. Canute repaired all the English churches and monasteries that were victims of Viking plunder and refilled their coffers. We speculate that Lillington Church, having been burned, was repaired by 1020. Under the whitewash, the stones of our doorway are grey sandstone, suggesting that they were inserted into the older nave wall, which we know to have been red. So 1020 may have been the year in which new north and south doors in the nave were built. The north door is the one which survives in the present sacristy, having been moved twice in the 19th century, in 1847 and again in 1884. To finish, with the help of my son Nathaniel, we're going to take a virtual tour of Lillington Church as it may have been in the year 1020. Approaching through the churchyard, we see the west end of the church and the west door recently blocked up. We pass the new north door. The church has a thatched roof and no east window. This churchyard cross is based on a reconstruction of one at Lillington in Wiltshire. Continuing past the cross, we enter through the new south door, identical to the north but lost in 1847, and pause in front of the Saxon chancel arch, which survived until 1810. Moving under the chancel arch, we pause in front of the altar, consisting of a single slab on a plinth. It was probably thrown out of the church at the time of Edward VI, and quite likely he's buried in the churchyard. Turning round, we see the font placed at the west end. If our story is correct, then a new roof was needed after Canute's visitation. This tie-beam roof is similar in style to the present roof, which may include some of its timber. We leave through the north door. A virtual tour of Lillington Church 1,000 years ago. Thank you for listening to this story of Lillington's Saxon Church.